You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 579, Drive.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we rev up our engines to review an episode of Star Trek, navigating the twists and turns of the story to see if it holds up and stand the test of time, and hopefully finding any morals, meanings, or messages along the way before we get to the finish line.
This week, Drive, the one where Tom is pushed to the limits and a stress test in every way possible, including learning how to communicate with his partner. Also, this is a story about a space race. I'll be back in a moment with trivia, but first, Norman is going to tell you how to reach us.
We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways you can help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now, here's John Champion sliding into first with this week's trivia.
All right, trivia for Drive. Well, we get a single written by credit on this one, and that goes to Michael Taylor, who, as you'll recall, maybe, wrote key DS9 episodes like The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. He spent much more of his time at Voyager, though, and the most recent of his stories that we covered was Fury, which he co-wrote with Brian Fuller. He's got 4 more credits with the series through this season. This was directed by Heinrich Kolbe. Rick, of course, spent most of his time on Voyager, and we most recently covered his episode Good Shepherd. This one is his penultimate episode with the series, though just one more before he jumps over to Enterprise for a single outing there. Let's meet our guest stars. Now, we briefly see Irina's co-pilot, Joxem, played by Robert Tyler. It's his only Trek appearance, but Robert is known for his long run on the soap opera Loving in the early 90s. And then after that, we have a pretty good number of returning guest stars in this episode, even if they aren't playing returning characters. We have Ambassador Ozal, played by Brian George, and if the name doesn't immediately ring a bell, you would definitely remember him in his human form when he played Julian's father on DS9 in Dr. Bashir, I presume, and we talked more about him when we covered that episode. Next up, another returning performer is Patrick Kilpatrick, who plays Asan. And again, he was more recognizable and more human-looking on DS9 when he appeared as Reese in The Siege of AR-558. But we also saw him on Voyager before as a Kazon in Initiations. And finally, Sia Batten is making her 3rd appearance on Star Trek with this episode. She was on DS9 twice as Gul Dukat's daughter, Tora Ziyal, in Indiscretion and Return to Grace. And we're not done with Sia just yet. She will be back one more appearance when we roll around to Enterprise.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Now this isn't pod racing.
Prologue. Tom and Harry give the new Delta Flyer a test drive by navigating a dangerous asteroid field. Out of nowhere, a hot rod alien vessel flies up alongside them, and a female alien voice comes over the comm, sizing up the flyer and challenging them to a friendly little race over to the nearest comet. Act 1. Tom and Harry engage, deploying the flyer's newest upgrades, and best their opponent by a tight margin. But the other ship has a problem with a damaged nacelle, and the cockpit fills with deadly gas. Harry beams over the pilot, an appealing Terralian named Irina. She's grateful, even a little teasing about a rematch, and Harry is perfectly ready to invite her back to Voyager where they can repair the damage to her ship. Back on Voyager, B'Elanna tries to squeeze the Doctor for his extra holodeck time. She's planned a weekend getaway for her and Tom, but the EMH has already booked a program for himself to play golf. B'Elanna appeals to his guilt and is persuasive. The Doctor relents. While Irina's ship gets patched up, she talks shop with Harry, who's clearly intrigued. Tom drops in, and Irina mentions the Antarian Transstellar Rally, a sublight race over a couple of billion kilometers meant to celebrate peace between former enemies. Tom and Harry practically beg Janeway to let them participate, and she actually likes the idea, as long as they win. For Starfleet's honor, of course. Tom swings by sickbay, only to be blindsided. The Doctor mentions his romantic trip with B'Elanna, and Tom remembers, oh yeah, that. He heads to engineering to break the news to her, and B'Elanna takes it surprisingly well, insisting that he go race. The holodeck will always be there. The race won't. She's just that understanding. On the surface, anyway. Act 2. Late at night in the mess hall, B'Elanna sits alone, frustrated, while Neelix tries to lift her spirits. She explains how she went to all that trouble to line up holodeck time for a weekend with Tom, and he completely forgot. Neelix says she should talk to him, but B'Elanna's already made up her mind. She says Tom should be free to do what makes him happy. Unfortunately, she's realized that what makes her happy is something deeper. And if fun is all their relationship has been, then maybe it's time to call it. She loves him, but she's ready to move on. In Janeway's ready room, she and Chakotay meet with Ambassador Ozal to finalize the details of entering the race. The rally is meant to promote peace, but Ozal is mired in the politics of it all. One species wants to host the closing ceremony, but another already has that honor, and if the balance shifts, well, the whole alliance could crack. Janeway offers a fix. Hold the ceremonies aboard Voyager. Neutral ground, no egos bruised. Ozal agrees. So then, at the opening event in the mess hall, the vibe is mixed. Pilots mingle and snack, and Tom tries to make small talk with a rude alien pilot, Asan, but Irina warns him and Harry that Asan has a reputation, not above bending the rules to win. Just then, Irina's co-pilot, Joxem, joins them. They seem quite friendly with each other, a little to Harry's disappointment. Later in Astrometrics, B'Elanna finds Seven analyzing the race course because apparently everybody is into the race now. Seven explains that participating in Tom's interests is a way to improve their working relationship. Support, after all, is efficient. That logic hits home, and B'Elanna has an idea. Cut to the shuttle bay where Tom waits in the Delta Flyer for Harry, but instead B'Elanna steps aboard, suited up and ready to go. She's his new co-pilot. The look on Tom's face, captured on a holo imager, says everything. They prep for launch, and things look good. After all, Tom's got a chief engineer on board now. On the bridge, Janeway signals Tuvok to begin the race with a flare, a modified photon torpedo, and with that, the race is on. Act 3. Tom and B'Elanna are cruising along, even with Hassan trying to knock them off course. Everyone on Voyager is paying attention to the play-by-play coming from Astrometrics, but Seven's delivery leaves something to be desired. Neelix steps in and gives his own version with a bit more drama. Tom and B'Elanna are holding steady in third place behind Irina and Hassan, but they're about to hit a tricky stretch. The Mobius inversion, a tight wormhole with some serious subspace distortion. Tom warns it's risky. On Voyager, more off-duty crews squeeze into Astrometrics to follow the race, and when Tuvok shows up with his weekly security report, he is quickly but politely told to shelve it. Not even he can look away from the action. As the racers vanish into the inversion, Voyager loses sensor contact. It's anyone's guess who will come out ahead. Inside the wormhole, B'Elanna sees a window to pass Irina and Hassan. Tom cautions her to wait, but she acts anyway, rerouting power to the shields and engines. The flyer surges forward, scraping both ships in the process, but it works. They emerge from the inversion in the lead, and the crew on Voyager erupt in cheers. Tom snaps at B'Elanna for ignoring his call, reminding her that he's the pilot. Before they can hash it out, an alert comes in. There's been an accident. All racers are ordered to stop. Irina's co-pilot Joxem was injured when her console exploded, and he's now in Voyager's sickbay. In the briefing room, Irina blames Hassan for the crash, claiming he scraped her shields aggressively. Hassan shrugs it off as collateral damage, and he plans to win the next round. B'Elanna admits she might have caused some of the damage too, but Tom covers for her, saying it was just aggressive racing. Irina lets it go. But Tuvok has news of his own. This wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with Irina's ship, and Ambassador Ozal fears the worst, an end to their peace. Act 4. Janeway isn't ready to cancel the race over one act of sabotage, but Ozal drops a larger concern. This isn't an isolated incident. He's received multiple threats from groups opposed to the fragile peace. He decides to cancel the race to avoid further bloodshed. But Irina pushes back, arguing that calling it off only lets the terrorists win. Surprisingly, Hassan agrees. Ozal reconsiders and calls the race back on. Janeway is in too. After all, her team is in the lead. Tom and B'Elanna head back to the flyer, and Harry arrives with an update. Since Joxem is out of commission, he is Irina's new co-pilot. Later in the flyer, Tom has B'Elanna reciting nursery rhymes to remember their flight maneuvers. Harry stops by to borrow a hyperspanner and sort of beaming about inviting Irina to stay for a while on Voyager after the race is done. After the race finally starts, with the flyer still in the lead, B'Elanna brings up how naturally Harry and Irina seem to connect, like they're in sync without even trying. Tom asks if she's talking about them and their relationship. B'Elanna deflects. Now's not the time. They've got a race to win. Meanwhile, Irina's ship starts falling behind. Harry runs a quick check and finds the EPS relays aren't responding. He suggests a quick fix, but Irina pushes him back, saying no. He's baffled and wonders why she seems so determined not to win. Every solution he offers, she shuts down. Then his console lights up with a warning, an overload, same as before when Joxem was her co-pilot. He manages to dive out of the way just before it explodes. That's twice now. Same malfunction, same seat. He looks up from the floor toward Irina to see her pointing her weapon right at him. Act 5. Irina isn't answering any questions, so Harry reaches for the console, rocking the ship and knocking her off balance. He manages to get her weapon and then tries to contact Antarian security, but she took comms offline. They'll just wait it out then. And in the meantime, when Harry checks on the race and notes the flyer is still in the lead, Irina smirks, good for them. The flyer passes the last marker, but Tom presses B'Elanna again about their relationship. She admits she joined the race, trying to connect through something that he loves. Tom is surprised. He didn't think they had a problem. That's the problem, she says. Just having fun isn't enough for her anymore. And then Tom cuts the engines. Harry and Irina watch as the flyer stops. Harry's suspicious. Why does she care so much about the finish line? Then the pieces come together. She's an isolationist who opposes the peace. She helped them join the race and sabotage the flyer, set to explode when it crosses the finish line. With comms down, Harry will have to try something different to get Tom's attention. So, on the flyer, Tom and B'Elanna are having a talk. He admits he cares more about her than the race. He just wants to be the guy she fell in love with. She's floored. This reconciliation gets pretty mushy, to use their word, and they kiss and then kiss again and then again, and he's about to propose when the console beeps. It's a Morse code message from Harry, something they both learned by playing Captain Proton. The message is to eject the converter now. B'Elanna confirms the fuel converter is leaking viridium isotopes, but the ejection systems aren't working, and Tom steers the flyer toward a nearby nebula to try to contain the blast. B'Elanna scrambles to fix the warp core ejection system, and in the middle of all of this, Tom proposes. B'Elanna gets the core ejected, and Tom floors it. The core explodes in the nebula, a massive shock wave catches the flyer, frying subsystems but sparing the crew. On Voyager, Janeway sees Hassan cross the finish line. Then the ship rocks with the force of the explosion. Tuvok reports a detonation, and then they spot the scorched, disabled flyer adrift. Tom and B'Elanna are fine, exhausted, slightly crispy, and B'Elanna says yes. Later, the crew enjoys the post-race festivities, while Tom and B'Elanna finally get their romantic getaway on the flyer, with champagne and a just married sign painted on the back. The end.
Fantastic recap, John. Way to bring it home. I feel
across that finish line?
Across that finish line in one piece.
Well, barely. Yeah. Anybody hears the outtakes, they know it wasn't pretty, but...
John, I feel the need.
Yeah?
The need for observations.
Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, look, we mentioned it last week, and I know that we're still out of production order sync, which, by the way, I might have something to say about that later when we get to the end of the show. But now we reveal that the Delta Flyer has been put back together. Mm-hmm. But has it been reassembled, or is this a new one? Because they're not very clear about this. And look, it is unfair to compare this show to a show that it is not. But let me just say, if this were, say, Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, we would have had a whole thing about either collecting those pieces and putting them together, or about rebuilding a new machine based on the old. Here it's just like, we got a new one. Don't you know? Doesn't everybody know? We got a new Delta Flyer. Here it is.
I mean, it looked like it got obliterated, at the end of Unimatrix Zero.
We all watched it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it got just hit. I mean, It was destroyed. Right?
Yeah. There's only so much you can do. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to buff this out. Little buffing compound, little elbow grease. Hey, Tom's got a toolkit, so why not?
Exactly.
I know that we beat up the whole language thing to death in Voyager, but it's kind of like at the very beginning of the episode, cute alien voice, kind of like pops over comms. Want to race? How do you know, one, the vernacular of their race? Two, how do you know that this is a good idea? Because I don't know, it could be a trap. Around the corner. And it's kind of like the whole thing with Arena, before we know it's Arena. When she says race you to the comet, that so reminded me of when Harrison Ford was Bob Falfa in American Graffiti, and he rolls up the Polymat, in the yellow in the yellow race car, and he's like, that can't be your car, that must be your mama's car. It just you can feel that, it's on. Or when what's his name, Needles rolls up to Marty McFly, Back to the Future. Says, what's wrong, McFly? Chicken.
Yes, totally that vibe. Absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned Arena, and yes, as soon as I saw her, I just thought, okay, here's an attractive woman on board now, and I just feel like this is going to be another setup for Harry to fail and be the butt of the joke. And this was just one of my first notes watching the episode. So we'll see how that plays out, shall we?
Yeah. To your point about the Delta Flyer, there's a really good close-up of the Delta Flyer, and it says Delta Flyer. But shouldn't it be the Delta Flyer A or the Delta Flyer 2?
Or just give it a new name. Just, we used the pattern from the Delta Flyer. We just, we built a new one and gave it a new name.
That would have been neat.
Anything.
Yeah, they should have called it Alice.
Oh, God. How dare you, sir? How dare you, sir? By the way, important to point out that the Doctor is indeed, he is punning with Spaceballs. Those are, I did.
What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken.
Also, by the way, at this point, don't they have multiple holodecks? And if we're going to beat this to death, couldn't the Doctor just experience it through programming? Couldn't you just shut him down for a moment and program that he's playing golf at St. Andrews? And he comes back and says, I played golf at St. Andrews.
But here's the thing, John. If we did that, then we wouldn't have been subjected to what I would consider one of the worst prop designs I have ever seen in my entire life. That putter makes no sense.
First of all, please refer to it as a space putter.
Space putter, right.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, a space putter.
Yes.
Okay, but
I had to freeze frame. I absolutely did.
If you know why a putter is designed a certain way, it is a flat face so that it hits the ball, it strikes the ball evenly to push the ball forward. This thing has like a medieval mace design, like a flange that like comes out of the center of the putter. That thing's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I don't know who to blame here. I don't know if it's because I think Michael Taylor had some producer status, but at this point I don't know if it was Rick, I don't know if it was Brannon, I don't know who went to the prop department and said make it spacey when you could have just had a putter.
Yeah.
That would have been fine.
Tom would have been like, where'd you get that? Oh, it's something that I found in the replicator. A replicator pattern from like back where he would have played at St. Andrews, Scotland with a putter like that, like a nice pin putter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
But though, all things being equal and the things balance out sometimes, I thought that the interior color scheme of the craft was really interesting because it reflected the exterior of the craft. And it also coordinated with Arena's uniform. So I'm like, okay, cool. Someone's actually thinking in that side, of the production when it came to a racer's uniform, and kind of like the brand, if you will, of that particular species.
That's a good point. There's a bit of coordination there. I thought the computer interfaces in Irena's ship looked vaguely Cardassian. Yeah. Like not exactly Cardassian, but just sort of, they wanted to make it look different and alien, and it sort of leaned that way a little bit.
I'm going to nominate vaguely Cardassian for our album for this show.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Anybody, you can run with it, please. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have to introduce this man, Dumb Tom, and his big, dumb, forgetful brain. Had this whole weekend planned, but nope. Something else came along, the shiny thing in front of his face.
Well, that shiny thing's a race, right? Because, racing really fast ships, I mean, could it be any more tailored to Tom's interests? And I'm just wondering if this would cause any problems later. I don't think so.
No. How could it?
We'll see. I love it when Tuvok says about the race, not to mention a serious drain on Voyager's resources. You're suggesting we reassign 15 crewmen to modify the Delta Flyer? Well, somebody's got to say it. Might as well be Tuvok. And Chakotay to some degree.
I straight up say no. Yeah exactly. Interesting scene with Milana there, how they play that. Super understanding. Or is she, as we get to the resentment, or maybe just kind of giving up? Less resentment, maybe. You know what? We'll probably both have more to say about that as we carry on. Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing with this race, I guess Starfleet's in it to win it because, they want to win a race for a peace treaty being brokered by 4 alien species who have created a ceasefire, but Janeway wants to win it for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the best foot forward with diplomacy at this stage.
I love it. I love it. We show total strangers. Wow, yeah, you guys have worked hard to have this peace. We're going to take this from you and then leave.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to let this whole putter thing go. So watching Picardo putt with that putter, obviously the ball is going to go everywhere. Again, space ball with a lit up glowing, module in it. Obviously, it's 24th century technology.
Yeah, that's how you know it's from space, of course.
But using it, the old glass, the glass putting target trick, that's old. That's like 20th century. That's 19th century.
That is true.
Technique. So,
yeah.
Tom says to B'Elanna when he spills the beans about what he did, and then she forgives him. I don't deserve you.
Yeah.
That's just a tip of the iceberg in this episode for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I'm gonna little spoiler alert. For me, it's gonna unravel fairly quickly.
Okay,
for me.
All right. Hold on, everybody. Hold on. Of a few standout scenes in this episode, I really like this thoughtful scene with B'Elanna and Neelix, and I wish we had gotten more of this kind of thing in the past. Not just between the two of them, but more of these reflective moments from B'Elanna.
Yeah,
such a good moment. Oh, my God. Yeah, and I don't know if we only get that kind of scene from her after her Barge of the Dead experience or what, but it's good.
Yeah. Roxanne's very good. Again, and all of these actors are very good when given the opportunity to actually act well-written lines like this, well-written scenes like this. I mean, it's the same thing with Neelix in this particular scene. Now, I love it when Neelix kind of like is this unofficial counselor, for the crew, where he's like the bartender, or someone who just wants to lend a sympathetic ear. The whole, what makes you happy? When Neelix asks, what about your needs? I was like, all right, now we've just gently scraped the next part of the iceberg with this particular scene.
Yeah. I feel like going back to this thing, what you said, how you set it up with Janeway deciding to just insert Voyager and Voyager's crew into this important race for other people. And I just, at that point, I really found it hard to get invested in the politics of this race and the whole after party, all of that stuff, because I thought Voyager also had the option to just get out of there, just not overturn this stone. They didn't have to do that. But it does lead to a nice little party on Voyager. And I'm usually a fan of these party moments in the mess hall. Get people relaxing, get little, space snacks in there. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but who pays for the catering? Right?
It's also a drain on Voyager's resources.
Tuvok's not wrong here, right?
No, he is not wrong at all.
The racing uniforms, not a fan. I am not a fan of those uniforms.
Yeah, they're a little cheesy. Yeah.
I really liked it. We're going to go all the way back to a couple episodes. I loved the athletic uniforms that Tuvok and the Maquis were running around in Learning Curve. This is all the way back in season 1.
Bring those back. Yeah.
And do you remember those the Mountain Gear repelling uniforms that they wore in Blood Fever when they went down that cave, that shaft, and they found that whole Klingon thing with the Borg at the end?
Yeah.
I loved those too. They're like these really tight fitting, kind of like gray uniforms, but with their branch trim, across the shoulders. Yeah. I thought those were great.
Super cool.
I thought that these racing uniforms were they were over ambitious.
Yeah.
Agreed. Not in a good way. When B'Elanna says, seems like the entire crew has come down with race fever, and then Seven just snaps back, maybe you could persuade the doctor to develop a vaccine. I loved that. And there were a couple times where I think that Jerry almost broke character here and there. Because I think she was
it was close. It was close. By the way, I just have to say, race fever.
Race fever.
I do like seeing B'Elanna actually deciding to participate in this. And we can talk about her motivations. We can talk about whether or not this was a good idea or a bad idea. But as far as moving the story along, as far as raising the stakes personally and for the purpose of the race, I thought this was the right decision. So I may have things to say about the writing or choices made later on, but I think this is kind of the save the cat moment for the show. Like you got to get to this point. Yeah.
Right. But it is funny because when she walked on the Delta Flyer, Tom's like, what are you doing in here? This is my man cave. This is my space.
Super clever to do that with the Holo Amateur too. I thought that was cool. Yeah. And then we have the effects of, the race starting. I like the, wasting another photon torpedo. And then we get all the ships moving fast with the people watching. It was a nice little use of the effects budget for this episode. Fun to have Neelix doing his sports announcer. Not really a Howard Cosell, but he's doing like his sports announcer bit. And he's naming off the names of the ships, and he calls one of these ships, I guess from the species that it belongs to, the Imhotep ship.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought that was, really, I wondered, is that just sort of a Starfleet translator version of whatever that thing is? Because, Imhotep is a very specific name from ancient Egypt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
During this entire race, I was kind of like feeling like the Ricky Bobby energy, if you're not first, you're last. Or like, when Tom was talking about scraping, it's like, cold trickle and the whole Rubbins racing kind of like vibe to it. I dug that. I love the crowd assembling behind Neelix when he's starting to actually get people interested with the race.
The build is great.
And I love that Tuvok kind of, he got caught up in it too, right? Mm-hmm. Then we get to, some of the more specific points of the episode, I think, that we're going to get to pretty soon in the discussion. I'm the pilot. When Tom says, I'm the pilot, I'm the one who flies the ship. There's something there. I agree with what he's saying. I just don't agree with how he said it. He's like, don't steal this thunder from me. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm the one who's supposed to win. I'm the one who's supposed to cross the finish line. You are just here.
Yeah.
And how you communicate with your team is just as important as the communication itself. So, like Neelix said, it's all in the delivery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. When we come back, we learn from Janeway that we have a single act of sabotage.
Sabotage?
Might be, in there. Mm-hmm. Now, okay, just to make things a little bit serious here for a moment, you, Norman, have very often framed our look at Star Trek in a pre-9/11 versus post-9/11 period. And I think that's really fair, especially because as we go on, there are things that very directly reflect that moment in history. There is a line here as they're discussing whether or not to carry on with the race that is essentially Arena saying, if we don't have the race, then the terrorists will have won. And for any of you who maybe weren't paying attention at the time or maybe a little younger and not aware of the context, right? So this episode came out prior to the terrorist attack of 9/11. After that point, that became such a familiar refrain almost to stop having meaning anymore because it was applied to everything. Oh, well, if we don't do this, then the terrorists will have won. If we don't travel, the terrorists will have won. If we don't live our lives normally, the terrorists will have won. So that line really struck me in a way that was at once historically important because it came before that entered the popular culture, and also a little comedic.
Yeah.
Because that line, like I said, sort of stopped having meaning at a certain point.
Yeah, I have something to bring up later when it comes to words that are used more frequently now than before.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And how they're either out of context for those times and in context now for today's times. We'll discuss that a little bit sooner. I was noticing that the actor who played the ambassador, he wore 3 layers of clothing. He wore a turtleneck, a vest, and a jacket.
Wow.
And I was like, that looks kind of heavy. I'm surprised that this actor wasn't just sweating through his prosthetics.
Maybe he was. I'm going to start doing that in my regular life, see what happens.
I'm in, Florida in the summertime right now, and oh my gosh, I am sweating everywhere.
Just looking at a turtleneck sweater, you're in pain. Yeah.
So Janeway says to the ambassador, just right after the scene before everyone goes back to the race, the last time I checked, we were winning. Again, you're not there to win. You are there to create alliances.
You were there to mediate. Yeah.
So,
okay, let's get back to Harry and his interesting, I won't call it infatuation, but he's trying to strike up a little something here at the arena, and I don't want him to screw it up. More importantly, I don't want others to screw things up for him or make fun of him, because that's worse. There's this line, B'Elanna says it, he'll not only fix your ship, he'll polish the bulkheads. And I thought, is that code? Because it sounds like code.
Sounds like code.
Sounds like code. Okay, yeah, good one. Cut to weird exchange between Tom and B'Elanna in the Delta Flyer when they're kind of talking through their patter of what to do in the race. And she calls it nursery rhymes, and it says that's what got him through the academy, which sounds weird and incorrect anyway. I don't think so. That doesn't sound in character. And then she says he got expelled, which he didn't. He didn't get expelled from the academy. So that's just not correct either. Anyway, carrying forward.
Did we have a Nick Locarno crossover moment there?
I think we did. I think the streams got crossed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the emotions, the reality of the relationship, it gets real in the Delta Flyer. And then Tom Paris says, the most Tom Paris line you'll ever hear him say, if something's bothering you, we should talk about it. Just classic Tom Paris right there. I'm being sarcastic in case anybody can't see my sarcastic face. And then, again, feeling bad for Harry here because Tom calls. He's like, well, she's not a Borg. She's not a hologram. She's not dead. She is a saboteur, though.
Fair.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you just said, I just don't have the energy anymore to pick apart Tom poking fun at Harry and his potential girlfriend choices. You win, Voyager. You win.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I just don't have the energy to fight that anymore. I did like seeing that random crew member listening to the race. Who was that?
Yeah, right. Hey, we need more of that.
That was great. And yeah, the conversation between Balan and Tom, it got real.
Yeah.
But the passive aggressiveness is on both sides. I'm not going to say that no one is to blame here. They were both to blame in that situation.
Agreed. When we have the reveal about Irina and we're back in her ship, now that's a really tight set anyway, but Rick Colby did a great job using the fisheye lens and handheld in that tight quarters. It ramps up the intensity. It ramps up the action. It just looked good in those scenes where he's trying to overpower her, get the weapon, etc. Really glad to see Harry just have an action moment here.
But his lines, though, in that scene, like the whole, what the hell is going on? Sit down and hold still. It sounded like he was overdubbed or badly dubbed or something. It just
could have been.
Just didn't sound right. His pitch was wrong, off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could have been both. Bad dubbing, all of the above. Yeah. All right. And then cut back to the Delta Flyer. And my note to myself, I don't know if I can take this bickering anymore. This isn't about the race anymore. Saved by a reference to Captain Proton, because it's just a little detail that we get to reference, something that happened before. We don't have to do a Captain Proton episode, but you go like, oh, well, look, Harry and Tom both learned something from their holodeck adventures. Interesting. Good.
But they must have gotten really good at Morse code for Tom. Well, first of all, for Harry to code that fast, and second, for Tom to read it that fast.
Oh, absolutely. They've spent months in there just doing Morse code. Maybe they thought the whole Captain Proton thing was just a Morse code exercise.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Yeah. And, look, I realize we have to ramp up the action here, but of course, the marriage proposal has to happen at the most dramatic moment. See also Day of Honor, when Tom professes his love when they're what? Oh, yeah, about to die.
Just one word could have changed this whole story. Just one word. But no one in this race thought to say ka-chow.
Hey, Mission Log listeners, just a quick reminder that time is running out to enter our incredible Star Trek giveaway thanks to our friends at Factory Entertainment.
That's right. At the top of the prize list is the Borg Queen Skull Signature Edition prop replica, a museum-quality piece recreated directly from the surviving screen-used prop in the CBS archive.
It's cast from heavyweight resin, finished in electroplated chrome, hand-weathered to match the battle damage from First Contact, and yes, it even lights up with a fade-out effect that mimics the Queen's cinematic demise. This is the crown jewel of any Star Trek collection.
And we've got 2 runner-up prizes, too. Each winner gets a hand phaser bottle opener from either TOS or TNG, functional, faithful, and just plain fun.
Entering is totally free, and you can boost your chances by completing multiple entry actions. The link is right there in the show notes. Whatever app you're listening on, just scroll down and click.
This is your moment. Hit that link, enter the giveaway, and you just might end up with a little piece of the collective on your shelf.
But don't wait. The Queen's not known for her patience, and neither is our deadline. So we're in, I would guess, the third out of the 4 legs of the race right now for our podcast. And
yep,
there's going to be a twist or a turn or 2 or 3 or several regarding how we approached this episode and kind of the conversation points that really struck us as being definitely things that we need to talk about when it comes to, well, I'm just going to say it right now, the Tom and B'Elanna relationship.
I think that's front and center, and I'm torn about it in many ways, because I feel like this was an attempt to, A, drive their story forward, no pun intended by saying drive, but yeah, to push their story forward a bit. Where else are we going to go with them? Okay, we're actually doing a thing that is relevant to the arc of the characters over the long haul. Great. That's awesome. We're also going to do some stuff here where they have to come to a crossroads in their relationship. We have to take what they mean to each other seriously, and we've got to get them to the next step. I like all of that as the impetus to do this. But I feel like everything we've seen up until now in 6+ seasons is the same old, the same very two-dimensional versions. Not that the characters themselves are wholly two-dimensional. I feel like B'Elanna has a lot more dimension than Tom does. But when it comes to their relationship, it has been a very two-dimensional sketch of a relationship. See also Miles and Keiko, which I think is problematic for how Star Trek wrote that relationship. We have had years of these two just playing on the surface, and Tom just being kind of the guy who goes to the holodeck and plays with his Camaro or does some other stupid boneheaded thing that is not aware of B'Elanna's feelings and her reality as a person in his life. And then we just see B'Elanna going full Klingon and exploding and getting furious and snippy with him, which also makes it seem like we're not supposed to take their relationship seriously. So now we're trying to do a thing here. We're actually trying to have a bit more of a nuanced take on their relationship. And what I like is that, okay, this time Tom does something stupid and careless yet again, but then B'Elanna decides to have a different kind of reaction. She either is so worn down from this, but she can't help it, but whatever it is, she decides to have a different kind of reaction. She doesn't blow up. She doesn't make some snide comment. She gives Tom what he wants, at least in that moment. Mm-hmm. But by doing that, it gives her this moment of self-reflection. And what I like about this is, cut to this scene with Neelix, which I think is probably the best in the episode, that there's not a singular correct answer here. And finally, that makes the relationship a bit more real and a bit more interesting. Because every relationship has to find ebb and flow, and how much do you rely on or expect the other person to be there for what you need, and how much do you give them their freedom to be the person that you love in the first place? Like, this is all actually serious adult stuff, which Star Trek has not dealt with well before. So let's go to that scene in the mess hall. B'Elanna is focused and thoughtful. She's not lashing out. She's sad. She's hurt. And I'm not sure that either of these two, at this point in the episode, I'm not sure that either of these two will really find satisfaction and happiness, if that's the right word for it, in the things that they love, since those goals are at odds with each other, and they likely will continue to be. So here's Neelix stepping in, trying to help, and he's giving this kind of surface level, like, well, I think all you need is love kind of an answer. But even then, like, that's not quite enough. It really sends B'Elanna away with more to think about. Let me compare that to a line in the episode that has nothing to do with the relationship. Cut to Ozal trying to explain to Janeway and Chakotay what's going on politically. Every time you make a concession to one participant, the other is offended. And that seems pretty superficial because we don't really care about, the stakes with these people that we don't know. But you dig a little deeper because, that's about the race. It's also about the relationship. Mm-hmm. So here maybe we actually see the A plot and the B plot actually coincide.
With the rubbing of shields.
Yes,
also,
there is some shield rubbing going on in this episode.
I don't know if that's code or not for all the youngsters out there. I see what is happening to B'Elanna in this story a bit differently.
Okay, good.
And how this particular episode fails her in possibly every way. From not just the character, but this whole relationship that is, in my opinion, fairly one-sided from Tom's point of view. Now, there's a scene that really kind of set me off from the standpoint of what are they doing with these two characters, especially B'Elanna. Mm-hmm. And it's when Tom says, I'm sorry, I was so excited about the race and I just completely forgot about the plans that we made. And B'Elanna says, it's okay. The race is a one-of-a-lifetime thing. The holodeck will always be there. And then Tom's like, great, because the captain thinks it's a great idea. Now you think it's a great idea, but I threw out the captain thinks it's a great idea, which means that all of the onus is put on B'Elanna.
Sure.
And that is...
It absolutely
is
yep.
garbage.
Yeah.
Absolute garbage. If Tom just said, like, oh, I love racing, I did. But when he brings up Janeway's name and he says that the captain thinks it's a great idea, is B'Elanna going to say, well, no? Because that, by default, says she disagrees with the captain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Tom's hiding behind the authority of the captain's decision and acknowledgement of his idea.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's
I
basically
agree.
saying, like, a lot of people know that, I've been in a long-standing relationship with Carol. We've been together for almost 24 years. And it's all of a sudden, like, I'm at work and like, oh, by the way, the boss thinks it's a great idea. I'm sorry that you spent like months planning our trip to this or that or wherever. But because the boss thinks it's a great idea, I think it's a great idea. You aren't in a position to say it's not a great idea.
Yeah.
Because that puts you at odds with everybody. It makes you out to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's like, because the entire thing, like, she and Tom were planning the trip together. It's not that she was doing it in secret. It's not that he ruined like a surprise party. They both knew that they were supposed to be at the specific day and time in the holodeck, of which she has been working tirelessly about to try and get these hours in so they could spend some time together. When have we ever in the series see Tom do any of that?
Never, ever, ever.
She gets him a TV set. She tries to make sense of what's going on with Alice. And now this, every single time, she is always put aside of his needs.
Well, see, and that's why I think it's so interesting. I always go back to that scene with her in the mess hall with Neelix, is because she's past the point of blowing up. She's past the point of having the typical B'Elanna reaction that every other writer has put on her. And now it's just like, can't do this anymore. I'm so knocked down by this from Tom's inattention, total lack of consideration for her well-being, for her emotional state, just for her mere presence there as a person in his life, that now she walks into the mess hall essentially numb to the whole thing. Hurt but numb. Because like you said, she can't argue with the captain, of course. Tom painted her into this corner. Saying, I have to go do this great thing, and the captain thinks it's a great idea, so there, bye. Yeah,
that was very frustrating, and she's out of maneuvering room. And the one thing that it grates on me, from that standpoint, is everyone gives Tom a pass, right?
Yeah.
Even B'Elanna is giving Tom a pass, and I want to know why. I want to know how this particular character has been crafted in such a way. Is this a good message that you're sending out to people? I'm stealing from my endnotes. I'm not going to anymore. I'm going to just... But
fair enough. Yeah.
Relationships, since we're talking about this in specific, relationships take a lot of work and communication. That's the whole kind of premise and the analogy of the racing team, right? You have a pilot and a co-pilot. I mean, obviously, Tom and Harry were supposed to do it. And maybe, I don't know, is Tom harboring some resentment that B'Elanna has taken over Harry's position because it's supposed to be us bros, right? And obviously, Tom's going to take the lion's share of the credit for winning because he's the pilot in his ship that he designed, and Harry's just along for the ride. Hopefully he'll find a girlfriend that's not either dead or a Borg, right? Because we don't forget that line came out. So the whole thing with B'Elanna coming in and intruding in his space, and then he says to her, I'm the pilot. You just are there to listen to my commands. Like,
the level of microaggression in his character development is staggering to me.
Yeah.
Just staggering to me. And I'm just, the only person that really had the self-awareness to see it was when Neelix said to B'Elanna, what about your feelings? What about your needs? What about what you want? Because the only person that actually cares about what B'Elanna wants happens to be Neelix.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sense of this, and I'm sure that there are Tom Paris fans out there that are being, Norm, you're just basically like, you're borderline insanity right now. And you're probably right, and I'll probably see it that way maybe in the playback of this, but you let me know why.
No, I don't think so. I mean, Tom Paris has been written like a child. You know, he is emotionally stunted the way he has been written so far. And everything in the relationship with B'Elanna so far has been very one note. And like I said before, finally this episode decides, okay, we got to fish or cut bait. We got to do something with this and decide where these two are going to go. Now, did they earn that or not? I think we'll get to that in the next segment. We'll see how it all coalesces in the end. But I think the episode does do right by B'Elanna, only to the extent, not by what we're putting her through, but by at least letting her acknowledge, okay, what have I been doing here? Have I been wasting my time? Is he ever going to be different from this person who, yeah, like there are aspects about him that I like and he's fun and et cetera, but is this ever going to be actually the thing that gives me satisfaction? You know,
I see where you're getting at with that. And the one thing that it's still difficult for me to kind of, to rationalize in their relationship is it's been so sporadic over time.
Absolutely.
Ever since, again, the only real time that Tom really showed his true feelings for B'Elanna is when they were about to die. Same thing, here, like you said in Observations. There is a scene where if they built like the moments correctly, if they earned those moments over time, because you have to build, we as the audience, you have to be invested in the emotional beats of the character or characters or relationships. If you don't have that, it's all false. And we're calling it out as being false because we're like, come on. In the history of your relationship, never have you had this level of communication that actually meant anything. Right. So there's that whole scene where, B'Elanna's like, I've never asked you to give up this race or anything else that you care about. I never asked you to stop being yourself. Great line. Great observation on her part. Tom says, the only self that I want to be is the guy you're in love with. What? Right? I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that the guy who wrote this script wrote In the Pale Moonlight.
And The Visitor. Two of
Star Trek's finest moments on screen.
Yep.
And this is the resolution, or towards the resolution, of these two characters finding themselves in this relationship. That proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that this is the most tacked-on idea of a relationship I have ever seen. Right?
Hard agree.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Dax's and Worf's relationship was Casablanca compared to this.
Is this an episode that drives you to tears or drives you to drink? Let's hear what Norman and John thought.
Hey, John, look, we've actually crossed the finish line, and you may not notice this, but none of us have exploded. Well, yet.
Well, we're waiting. We still have a few minutes to go, so there might be some explosion here. Some what do they call it? Shield rubbing.
Shield rubbing. As the kids say nowadays.
That's what the kids call it.
But as we always do at the end of Mission Log, we look through our observations and look through our discussion points and hopefully come to the realization that we did learn something from the episode. And especially with if the episode did hold up, did it stand the test of time? And then did we find any morals, meaning, or messages contained in the episode? I think, hold on a second. Is that an engine smoking that I see?
Oh, okay.
I feel a little shimmy in the floor.
That's it.
It may be the beginning of our closing here. I'm not sure.
Right.
What say you, John?
Okay.
Are you comfortable on your ship? Are you jumping?
Look, I can make this kind of short and sweet. I can just get right over that finish line pretty quickly here with this in assessing if Drive holds up. Let me put it into this context. I'll give it this. I think the episode comes at the right time. Now, remember last week we talked about how we're out of production and air date order because what we watched last week was actually meant to be 2 ahead. Drive should have come earlier. But I think they actually made the right decision here as far as placement, because we just had the fantastic episode Imperfection. We loved that, focusing on 7 of 9 and the cortical node. You all remember, right? And while I haven't watched it yet, I did read ahead just the log line for the next episode, and it heavily features Tuvok. So I guess I'm kind of on board with that. And this one gets buried in between those two. Because imagine this. Imagine that you are ready for season 7 of Voyager to start. And, Unimatrix and Unimatrix 0 Part 2, maybe you felt like, okay, maybe it's not the strongest. Maybe it's a little derivative of Best of Both Worlds, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. But I'm on board here for season 7, ready to wrap this up. And then imagine you got Drive right after that. And I think I would just turn off the TV and never watch UPN again. Yeah, I think it would be too much of a letdown, right? So I'm glad that we saw Imperfection last week, even though it was Borg-centric, fine. That episode, in our discussion, I think we found that there is so much to mine there, so many ways to go, and yet continue to be areas to discuss within that one. And with this one, I'm trying to put my finger on exactly what the problem is here. But part of it to me is I think they failed to make the race interesting or exciting or have me invested in it. And then you have this other plot where we have waited so long and played out this dysfunctional relationship with Tom and B'Elanna for so long. And now the answer is, okay, in another state of duress, they decide to get married. And I'm just thinking, why bother? Why? Why are we doing this to either of them? If this episode were to hold up, it would hold up only in the sense that it gets us from unmarried Tom and B'Elanna to married Tom and B'Elanna. That is a continuity note, and that's it. But as far as an episode of Star Trek that tells you something about Star Trek, that tells you something with an interesting moral meaning message, well, we'll get to that in a second. I don't think we're firing on all cylinders here. So I cannot say that this episode holds up. I don't think it's certainly not a strong character piece when we just came off of a very strong character piece. And it's not a strong action-adventure piece because I don't think we're invested in the action-adventure. So, sorry, Voyager. And sorry, Mr. Taylor, because you wrote some really great scripts before. I don't think this one is it. What do you think, Norman?
Rarely do I ever really immediately feel whether or not an episode does or doesn't hold up. And sometimes, we've done this in discussion where we've even convinced each other that an episode that we didn't does or doesn't did.
I love that, honestly, is where I will have a gut reaction to an episode and then I watch it 2 or 3 more times in prep and I go, oh, wait a minute. No, now I get what
Imperfection was like that for me. And I'm glad you brought that up before. But this episode really it shows its age. I'm not saying it in a good way because it shows kind of like this whole pre-gaslighting terminology era when it was written. This is 2000. The ubiquitous use of gaslighting, or more importantly, I would say overuse, but when it was really coming in more into pop culture was kind of like in the mid-2000s. So this was before that. And really, this showcases the lacking in writing quality in Star Trek as a whole when it comes to romantic relationships, right?
Yeah.
I think honestly, and I know that this may sound funny, I think the only honest, real relationship I ever saw in Star Trek was Kirk and the Enterprise, and how he felt about her and how heartbroken he was to destroy her at the end of Search for Spock.
You're not wrong.
Because you feel something about that, right? You feel about something about the characters and what they go through. And I'm barely invested, or I was barely invested in Tom and B'Elanna's relationship at the start. And this episode doesn't do them any favors. You know, it doesn't do Star Trek any favors. It actually, it proves again that this relationship just felt like a tacked on character arc to do something with Tom and B'Elanna, to provide some type of like interpersonal drama between two characters. And it doesn't, because what we don't have is an actual relationship. What we do have is somebody who, in this case, Tom, like everything that happens in his relationship that has an issue, or it is an issue, it falls on deaf ears, or he doesn't care or ignores it, right? And the only one who really sacrifices or puts any effort forth into this relationship is B'Elanna, but then she always gets kind of pigeonholed as like the nag, the person who's like constantly forcing Tom out of his comfort zone so that they can be together in a relationship. You brought up before O'Brien and Keiko, and it's the same thing, right? Yeah, even Dax and Worf, like it's just the same thing, right? But B'Elanna's not being a nuisance or an nag. She wants to be an active part of this relationship, and then she's gaslit into what we as the audience are being told to believe who she is. And she's not that character. She's not that person. But that's what gaslighting does to us. And I don't like, and believe me, like when, as an audience member, when I realize that that happened to me, that really upsets me. It's purposeful and it's insulting. So it asks the question again. It begs the question, begs it for me at least. Who actually is Tom Paris as a character? I'm trying to put this on paper, right? Because aside from his demotion, which was easily rectified and quickly, not sure why, and maybe Threshold, what has he really actually suffered in this show? What has he learned from his 6 years on Voyager that shows us that he's grown into this character that Janeway seems to believe should be re-promoted because his acts of service to the ship are thus, right? Where is he from when he got plucked out of prison to now? What have we learned, right? Because this is what I've learned.
Right.
He literally does what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. He's forgiven at every turn. He's given a promotion. So how do I empathize with someone who is white, male, entitled, always belittling his best friend Harry, who is essentially just Tom's token go along to get along Asian, and then have a one-way relationship with B'Elanna, who's consistently gaslit in the series in their relationship? What was the intended arc of this character for this series? Someone please explain that to me, because let me be clear. I have no problem with Robert Duncan McNeil as an actor and as a director. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite movies of all time is 1987's Masters of the Universe. He plays a great, he plays Kevin, you know, the keyboard player who doesn't believe in himself, boyfriend of Courtney Cox. And he has this great scene with Anthony DeLongis, who we all know as Maj Kula. I enjoy Robert Duncan McNeil as an actor and as a professional. What I don't enjoy is how Tom Paris has been crafted in a character who is completely different. He is a different entity altogether for me, right? Tom is selfish. He's self-absorbed. He's unaware, right? He doesn't understand how he treats the people around him, the level of disrespect and disassociation he has with the feelings that they have for him. Like, and here's what drives me freaking nuts about the series is that those characters, especially B'Elanna and Harry, they're apologists for him.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, Tom,
You're right.
you know, like he should do what he wants. And, or he's like, I'm just here for Tom's coolness and his programs and like, you know, being the sidekick in his wacky adventures with Captain Proton. No. But here's what I realized. Writing was different back then. Right?
Yeah.
Gaslighting wasn't a specifically coded and called out entity as it is now back then. The bro code was pretty much like the dominant way of the wink, wink, nod, nod. Don't worry. This particular character, the way he was written, like I said, the white, male, entitled. He's good. Don't worry. We got him written well. Everything else around him falls by the wayside as long as that person is taken care of. That's great. But this is Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be the open-minded, inclusive science fiction series by comparison to other science fiction series out there. And it also wasn't immune to this type of misogyny. And that's what frustrates me the most.
So well said. I am going to, I'm just going to grab the writer's hat off the shelf here. I'm going to pop it on for a second. Not long, don't worry, folks. Because as you were talking, that was really interesting, by the way. I love the way you put things into this kind of type of context. As you were talking, I thought, okay, go back in time. Okay,
Wayne's World
we're doing
time.
that. First time on Mission Log, right? We're going back in time, going back to the writer's room, 1995, and trying to figure out what the arc is for these characters over 3, 4, 5, 7 years of these of this show, right? We're giving up on the Tom and B'Elanna thing. That's just we haven't figured out Tom. He's the frat boy. He just wants to do stuff by himself. He wants to go, play in the garage, whatever. B'Elanna, we don't really have a handle on her. Maybe we're going to find some nuance down the road for her. But right now, she's just kind of volatile and unsure of her Klingon half. And that's interesting enough to follow. What we're going to do instead, we're going to focus on Harry Kim. But here's why. Okay, because Harry Kim has all this interesting stuff coming up where he's going to die and come back. You're going to go, whoa, wow, we're going to kill Harry Kim twice and see how that affects him. There's something to explore there. He's also got an Academy girlfriend, okay? Some of you may remember. Her name is Libby, all right? But Harry is this young guy. He's the youngest officer on board. And he's got a lot of growth to do. He's coming into himself, right? He has this kind of parental relationship that, Janeway sees him as kind of somebody to mentor, to raise, right? But we're actually going to introduce a character to this show who can be Harry's girlfriend. And we can actually see Harry mature when he gets a promotion. We can actually see him mature and have a relationship because he's actually a good guy. And he's actually somebody who had a relationship back on Earth. He wasn't just in a penal colony in Australia, right? And that will actually be a source of inner conflict as well, because maybe he's the first one to figure out, well, we're not going to be home potentially for 70 years. And we're actually going to explore this idea that a character on board may have needs and may want a relationship while he's out there. And he's got to deal with that. Maybe he needs to seek counsel in people like Tuvok, who definitely is staying loyal to his wife back in Vulcan, and seek counsel in people like Janeway, who got the Dear John letter from Mark saying this is not going to work out anymore. So we actually had the opportunity here for a character who would have all the right reasons to explore in a nuanced, mature, adult relationship that could flourish, maybe even come apart by the end of it, depending on what happens, but it would actually be a satisfying arc instead of whatever this is.
If I may put on my writer's hat also, John, and
please,
sit next to you.
I see it there with you.
So in that same room, and this is how I personally feel. I have no facts about what happened in that writer's room. This is just how I personally feel, giving what you've laid out. And that may have happened, maybe. But from a writer, producer, showrunner, network standpoint, someone's going to raise their hand and say, like, those are all great ideas. The problem is that he's Asian. Right? And no one is going to connect with a sympathetic Asian character because that's just not who they are.
Well, hang on. I understand. And you, way more than I do, have a right to question that. Absolutely. I will say that I think that from Star Trek's point of view, again, not with a great track record of relationships, but Star Trek's overall track record with letting different people within those casts, different ethnic backgrounds, whatever, have their moment. And certainly by the mid to late 90s, I don't think it would have been strange on a show with a woman who is the captain to have some romantic and adult growth out of a young person, older than Wesley, but younger than Tom Paris, actually get to have a romantic life. And let's not forget, Garrett, friend of the show, people's top 50 sexiest, was he the sexiest man alive?
I think he was in there. I think he was in that list.
Yeah. So there is some reason, even if they see that, even if the writers, give it a year or two and they go, oh, wait a minute, we've got sexy Garrett Wang. Mm-hmm. We should be writing more for him. Yeah. There's the reason to do it.
But also remember that this is at that time when the UPN was couching Voyager along with wrestling. And let's see, can anyone out there in the audience right now, who was the top Asian wrestler of the WWE? Oh, that's right, no one. Why? Because that's not the appeal, that's not the sales appeal for an Asian actor or an Asian entertainer or an Asian entertaining property. Right? Not in 2000, for sure. Like Shang-Chi, Crazy Rich Asians, anything that Michelle Yeoh's in right now, all that stuff is today. It wasn't then. Yeah. Right? And that's the problem. The problem is the issue of quote unquote inclusivity in this franchise that's not inclusive.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it,
I see,
who gets really put to the side in this relationship with Tom Paris? The Latina, the crossbreed Latina, and the Asian. Mm-hmm. It's their feelings that get put to the side, not Tom's.
Yeah.
That is where this episode really lays out the weaknesses of those relationships.
Well said. All right, let's wrap it up with our morals, meanings, messages. There's not a ton of nuance here when it comes to the politics of the race that is at the center of Drive. I get it. It's all very surface level. Our administrator, Ozal, he's frustrated that he can't make everyone happy. He's got antagonistic factions on either side. I get it. I suppose if this plot line were to be explored with any depth, you could actually connect it to other moments in like Olympics history, where various factions have tried to upend the games with a threat or an attack. There have been boycotts. There have been minor incidents. Probably the most important, famous, and biggest incident that was not minor was a deadly terrorist attack in 1972 at the Olympics in Munich. Look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. So you could have actually taken the premise here and made it something much more serious. But, we're trying to serve a lot of purposes with this episode. As far as Irina, don't be racist, okay? Maybe that's the message for Irina. but seriously, she is stuck.
Don't be a racer?
Right. Don't be a racist racer.
There you
go. Okay. Yeah. She is stuck in the comfort of a conservative, that is with a little c, by the way, attitude that the status quo or the perceived values of the past are worth preserving because what? Because it's what she knows, it's what makes her and others like her more comfortable, not like an enlightened Harry Kim or Voyager crew who come along with their values of inclusion and diplomacy. We don't spend a lot of time on that, but that is her motivation. And as for B'Elanna and Tom, my note here was, can we not? Although Seven actually maybe has some good advice here. She lays it out. She says, as far as Tom goes, when she's talking to B'Elanna, she says, I've learned that if I embrace some of his interests, support him in his personal goals, we're able to function more efficiently as crewmates. Okay. That's good advice for anybody at any time. Back to your point, though, B'Elanna has done that. She has done that over and over again. What we're not having is equal effort from either side.
And that's
what about you, Norm?
That's fair. And there is like a really there's a nice scene for what it's worth about when Tom pitches why the race is important. I don't disagree with that. Like Tom says, this race embodies the Federation values, everything the Federation values: peaceful coexistence, free exchange of ideas. Janeway says, I think it's a great idea. Tom says, you do. Tuvok says, you do. It's funny. It's a nice scene.
It is, yeah.
But it's what Janeway agrees to. She says that this competition is just the sort of break we need. It gives us the chance to make some friends and allow the crew a little R&R, request granted, as long as you win. Right? Just as an aside, right?
Yeah, that's it was that little bit.
I mean, I agree with everything that is being said here. I think it's a good idea for Voyager to be in the Delta Quadrant, to make allies, to make friends, to not be the center of attention, and certainly not to win someone else's race, but that's beside the point. But it's what the Federation does. It brings all of these different species together and becomes kind of like the host of the party, as they did.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I just wish that this story wasn't told through kind of like the subterfuge is what Tom really wanted, and that was to actually just race the Delta Flyer against this other chick's hot ship and, you know, being a hot chick. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like when Arena pulled up next to him and said, hey, you want to race? I'm like, okay, that's this story.
You just see that coming.
What else are we going to fit into this story that pads out the next 46 minutes? Right? And that's unfortunate because this could have been a really interesting take on interspecies negotiations for peace for 100 years, and this thing cements it, and Voyager is at the center of it, kind of like a, look what we do, Federation. This is what we do, right? And establishing a far better reputation than some of the events that Voyager left behind that have given Voyager and Starfleet a bad name. Right, you know, into some alien species. That's also you know, part Janeway trying to do good in the Delta Quadrant. That's all fine. I just wish that the whole premise behind Voyager participating in this event was about that and not being Tom's self-serving ulterior motives to simply indulge his passion for things that go fast, that burn fuel.
Yep.
Also, this episode illustrated the importance of communication in every relationship, whether it's professional or personal. Communication is like the cornerstone of building trust, you know, building respect, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses that everyone brings to the relationship. There's a reason why one of the most celebrated movie lines in pop culture history resonates so much for a generation of fans out there. Talk to me, Goose. From 1986's Top Gun. A lot of us know that. A lot of your ears out there perked up when you hear those words, talk to me, Goose. So when Maverick and Goose were a team, they were unstoppable. You know, Pilot and Rio, you know, on the volleyball court, best friends, and always in constant communication, either in real life or in flight and battle. They've shared so much synergy, right, in their relationship because they always communicated. And when Goose was gone, when Maverick needed to find the only way he could really move forward, he said to himself to re-engage in the fight and life, he said, talk to me, Goose. It sure would have been nice if Tom really and honestly said to B'Elanna, talk to me, Torres.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, repression.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. We've won the race, we've claimed our place, so next week I guess we're back to being cold and lost in space? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.